You'll be leaving soon anyway, my husband Ethan said as he poured himself a cup of tea. I stood still and looked at him. His voice was flat, not a guess, not a question, a statement. What makes you say that? I asked. You do not need to know everything, he said. He did not look at me. He set the cup down and watched the counter like it had answers. I waited. I did not have a suitcase packed. I did not have a place to go. I had a grocery list and a work call on my calendar. I had plans for the afternoon. When did you decide that for me? I asked. You have been restless, he said. You will be happier somewhere else. Restless did not match my days. I had been putting order into small things. I had been asking about paint, storage, a weekend project he kept delaying. None of that pointed to leaving. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. You will figure it out, he said. How would I figure it out if I did not plan it? I asked. He glanced toward the window and back to the counter. He did not answer. Who told you I was leaving? I said. He rolled his sleeves, one and then the other. He crossed his arms. He waited me out, like he always did when he wanted me to stop asking. If you know something that involves me, say it, I said. I am saying it, he answered. You will be leaving soon. It is better to be honest. Honest about what? I asked. Not everything is for you, he said. The sentence closed the space between us. It meant there were plans that included my life and excluded my knowledge. I heard my voice drop into the careful tone I used when I needed a straight answer. If something is happening that affects me, I have a right to know, I said. You are not crazy, he said. You are just not the person who needs to handle this. What is this? I asked. It will make sense, he said. Do not make a scene. I am not making a scene, I said. I am asking about my home. He looked at the clock on the stove. Soon, he said. That is the timeline. When is soon? I asked. Soon, he repeated. He checked his watch. He did that when he was waiting for a call or a message. I noticed the small pause that came before he spoke again, like he was listening for something. I will explain everything, he said. Just do not get mad. Explain what? I asked. Not now, he said. I have a call. His phone buzzed as if that was planned. He looked at the screen, then stepped into the hallway. His voice dropped. I could hear pieces, timing, ready, later. Nothing I could combine into a story that made sense. I did not follow. I stood by the counter and kept my hands still. It was an ordinary morning before this. A list, a calendar alert, a question about dinner. Now there was a line I had not seen, and I was already on the wrong side of it. He came back and faced me. You are taking this the wrong way, he said. You invent drama. I asked you for facts, I said. Give me a date or a reason. It is not for today, he said. Is someone coming here? I asked. He did not answer. Is this your mother? I asked. Did she say she wants me out? My mother stays out of this, he said. Do not start that. I am not starting anything, I said. You used the word leaving. You used the word soon. Those are not small words. You do not need to turn this into a fight, he said. I am standing still and asking you to speak clearly, I said. What happens to me? You always make everything personal, he said. It is personal, I said. It is my life. It is a house, he said. You attach too much to it. I watched his hands. He moved his thumb along the edge of the counter. That was his tell when he was hiding stress. He kept his breathing steady. I knew that pattern too. It meant he had decided on a position and would not move from it. "What are you waiting for?" I asked. "For the right time," he said. "Whose right time?" I asked. He picked up his phone and turned the screen face down. "You can trust me," he said. "I am thinking about what is best." "Best for who?" I asked. "For everyone," he said. "Everyone." That word did not include my name. It included a group I did not control. It told me he had measured the cost of my reaction and chosen to ignore it. It told me he had other voices in his ear. "I am not leaving," I said. He looked almost amused. "You think you are the only one who decides," he said. "About my own plans," I said. "Yes." "You will understand later," he said. "Please be calm." "I am calm," I said. "I am not blind." He moved around me, opened a cabinet, closed it, did not take anything. He checked the time again. The small sign said he was waiting for a signal. I kept my voice even. "Are you packing my things?" I asked. "No," he said. "Are you asking me to pack?" I asked. "No," he said. "Then what does soon mean?" I asked. "It means do not plan long-term," he said. "Do not plan long-term where?" I asked. "Here," he said. "So I should make plans somewhere else," I said. He did not answer. "Do you hear how that sounds?" I asked. "You always focus on how things sound," he said. "You miss the point. The point is that you think you can tell me I am leaving without giving me a reason," I said. "You think I will accept that." "I think you know yourself," he said. "You move when you feel it." "I do not feel it," I said. "I feel pushed." "I am not pushing," he said. "I am preparing you." "For what?" I asked. "For change," he said. "Change you planned," I said. He watched me. He did not confirm. He did not deny. The phone buzzed again. He looked at it. He did not pick it up. He waited. It buzzed a second time. He reached for it and silenced it. "Are you going to tell me today?" I asked. "It is not the day," he said. "Then when?" I asked. "When it is ready," he said. "Who decides ready?" I asked. He held my eyes and said nothing. It was the same as a yes to someone I could not see. It was the same as a no to me. I felt the air go tight in my chest. I kept my hands flat on the counter and made my voice steady. "If there is something I need to prepare for, say it now," I said. "Do not let me find out by accident." "You will not like it if I say it now," he said. "I do not like this version either," I said. He exhaled through his nose, short. He picked up the cup and took one sip. He looked at the clock again. "I need to take a call," he said. "Take it here," I said. "I will take it where I want," he said. He stepped into the hallway. I heard the low tone he used with people he wanted to keep calm. "Yes, under control, after." It matched his face when he came back. He was set. He put the phone down, screen first. He rested his hand on it. "Are you done telling me I do not need to know?" I asked. He said, "You will see." "Soon," I said. He did not answer. I stood there in the same place and watched him pretend this was an ordinary morning. If I was leaving soon, someone knew when. And that someone was not me. When Ethan left the kitchen, I stayed where I was until I heard the front door close behind him. He had not told me where he was going. He did not have to. He had the tone of someone who would be gone for a while. I picked up the mug he had been holding, then set it back down. The tea was cold. I went to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. My mind was stuck on the word soon. I had no plan to leave, no reason to leave. But he had spoken like it was already arranged. It made me think about when I first moved in here, 2 years ago. We had been married for only 3 months when I left my apartment and moved into this house in the suburbs. I also had another house, one I had bought before the marriage, across town. It was sitting empty then, and I thought we would decide together what to do with it. Back then, it felt like there was no reason to rush. Ethan's younger brother, Kyle, carried in the heavier boxes. He was 19 then, always joking, always quick to say, "Don't worry, I've got it." They had both made me feel like I was stepping into a family that wanted me here. The first weeks were easy. Diane cooked dinner most nights and insisted we eat together. She asked about my job, remembered the names of people I worked with, and told me I was part of the family now. Kyle would help me carry laundry downstairs or unload groceries when Ethan was working late. I thought we were all settling into a rhythm. Even when Ethan was away for work, I felt comfortable in the house. Diane would bring me tea in the evenings. Kyle would tell me stories about his friends, his classes, the job he was trying to get. I had given up my apartment without hesitation. Ethan told me it made more sense financially, and I agreed. He said living here would give us a chance to save for our own place. I believed him. We talked about what kind of house we would buy, what neighborhood we might choose. There were family photos on the walls. Ethan as a kid, Kyle in high school, Diane with her late husband. At first I felt like an outsider looking in, but Diane encouraged me to add my own photos to the shelves. I put up one of Ethan and me from our wedding and one from our honeymoon. It felt like blending lives. We had dinners where everyone laughed, even disagreements were small, about the thermostat, the grocery list, whether to get a new couch. Nothing that felt like a warning. When I look back now, I can remember how safe I felt then. I was surrounded by people who seemed to care about me. If there were tensions, I did not see them. If there were plans being made, they were not visible to me. Ethan would come home, drop his keys on the counter, and ask if I had eaten. We would talk about our day while Diane cleaned up in the kitchen. Sometimes we would all sit in the living room watching TV together. It was ordinary. I never thought about who owned the house or whose name was on the paperwork. Ethan said it was the family home and would stay in the family. That was fine with me. I was part of that family now, or at least I thought so. I remember one Saturday morning when Ethan and Kyle were in the garage fixing something on Kyle's car. Diane came in from the backyard with a basket of tomatoes from her garden. She handed me one and said, "You belong here, you know. You fit." I smiled and told her I felt the same. I meant it. I had no reason to doubt it. In those early months, I would call my friends and tell them how lucky I felt. I told them Diane was kind, that Kyle was easy to be around, that Ethan seemed happy. I thought this was what marriage was supposed to be. Two lives coming together and making room for each other's people. I had my own things stored in the spare room. Diane called it your space and said I could decorate it however I liked. I painted one wall a soft blue and put a small desk by the window. It was where I kept my files, my laptop, and a box with important documents from before I married Ethan. We even talked about renovating the basement. Ethan said it could be a place for guests, or maybe a home office for me if I ever worked from home. We made lists of what we would need: paint, flooring, new lighting. Looking back, I can see that I was building a future in my head that may not have matched theirs. I thought we had the same plan. I thought the goal was to save, to build, to move forward together. Nothing in those first months hinted that there would come a day when Ethan would tell me I would be leaving. If there were signs, I missed them. If anyone knew something, they kept it out of sight. It is strange how a place can feel completely safe until one sentence changes it. I stayed on the couch that morning, thinking about those early days and how far they felt from the conversation in the kitchen. The same walls, the same furniture, the same people, but a different reality. I heard the front door open again. Ethan walked in, put his phone on the table, and asked if I wanted coffee. I said no. He didn't ask anything else. I watched him move around the kitchen, like nothing had happened. Like this was still the same house it had been 2 years ago. But I could not stop thinking about the moment I arrived here, when Diane smiled and Kyle took my boxes, and I believed I was home. That memory did not match the way Ethan had looked at me today. Ethan stood at the counter like nothing had changed. I watched him rinse his cup and wipe the surface with short, neat strokes. He asked if I needed anything. I said no. He nodded and checked his phone again. He said he had to meet Kyle about errands. He did not say what errands. He said it would not take long. He left without asking if I wanted to come. I stayed in the living room and tried to focus on work messages. My head kept circling back to the word soon. I typed replies that sounded normal. I did not feel normal. When he returned later, Diane was with him. She set a bag on the table and said she picked up a few things for the pantry. She looked at me and asked how my day was going. I said fine. Ethan was already scrolling his phone. They started talking about schedules, but their voices dropped when I stepped closer. Diane switched to asking me about a recipe she wanted to try. Ethan looked at me, then at his screen. The shift was quick and practiced. That night in bed, Ethan turned away sooner than usual. He said he was tired. I said nothing. I counted his breaths the way I used to when I worried about him after long days. It felt like I was listening to a wall. In the morning, he said he would meet Kyle for coffee. He said they had something to figure out. I asked what? He said family logistics. He did not add more. I noticed how the house changed when I walked into a room. Conversations that had been steady went thin. Words like later, handle, and date faded out. Diane would smile and ask if I wanted tea. Kyle would make a joke about the weather. The topic from seconds before would disappear. Kyle started showing up more often. He and Ethan stood close, talking low, hands in pockets, glancing at the door. When I came within earshot, Kyle would ask me about my day like that had been the subject the entire time. Ethan would look bored, like nothing important was happening. Ethan set a new passcode on his phone. I realized it when I saw him enter it twice in 1 hour. He had never cared before if I saw him swipe open his screen. Now he turned the phone away from me and held it low, as if the angle mattered. I asked if everything was okay. He said yes, just busy. I asked if it had to do with his job. He said partly. I asked if I could help with anything. He said there was nothing for me to handle. At dinner with Diane, I brought up the storage shelves we had planned for the garage. She said we could do that later. Ethan said he would check a date. He did not check anything. He put his phone face down. Kyle called one evening, and Ethan stepped outside even though it was cold. He paced by the porch light. I watched through the window without moving the curtain. He nodded, said sure, said okay, said we will. He came back in and said he needed a shower. He did not mention the call. I tried not to assume the worst. I told myself this might be a phase. Families go through phases. Work gets stressful. People become private about something that ends up being minor. I waited for proof I was wrong to worry. It did not come. On a Sunday morning, Diane asked me if I had any plans for the afternoon. I I said I needed to organize the spare room and go through some files. She paused longer than felt normal and said that sounded productive. Ethan and Kyle exchanged a look that was too quick to catch, but I caught it. When I walked into the kitchen later, they were talking about a meeting. Ethan used the word deadline. Kyle said it would be tight. Diane told them not to discuss business at home. They stopped. When she left the room, they started again, quieter. I stood by the sink and opened the tap to make noise. They walked out. That night, Ethan told me to stop worrying. I said I would if he told me what I was supposed to stop you worrying about. He said I made problems by insisting on detail. I said detail is how adults avoid confusion. He said he did not want to fight. We lay on our backs with a space between us that had not been there months ago. He kept his phone on the nightstand, screen down. When it buzzed, he reached for it fast. He typed with his body turned away from me and said it was work. I asked if Diane had said anything about me. He said no. Why would she? I asked if Kyle had a problem with me. He said Kyle liked me fine. He sounded like someone reading lines he did not feel. I started to watch small things, the way people watch larger ones. How he checked the door lock twice before bed. How he put his keys in a different spot. How he started keeping his wallet in his bedroom drawer instead of near the front door. None of those on their own meant anything. Together they felt like a plan to reduce chance. One afternoon, I walked into the living room while Ethan and Diane were talking. Diane said the words better for everyone. Ethan nodded. Diane saw me and asked if I had eaten. The sentence on the table vanished. Kyle began to speak for Ethan in small ways. If I asked Ethan about a plan for the weekend, Kyle would answer first and say they had already worked something out. Ethan would agree like this was normal. I would nod because arguing over a calendar felt like playing the wrong game. On a weekday evening, I asked Ethan if we could sit down after dinner and go over expenses. He said he had to meet Kyle. I said it would be short. He said later. He left while I was clearing plates. Diane offered to help and told me not to stress. She said stress made people imagine things. I stopped sharing small ideas, like paint colors or storage bins. Every suggestion made me feel like I was offering plans in a place where plans were already set. I kept my sentences short so I would not sound emotional. It did not change his answers. He started working late, 2 nights in a row. He said he had a rush project. On the 3rd night, he said he would be out again. I asked if it was the same project. He said yes. I asked what it was about. He said technical things. He did not name them. Kyle texted him constantly. The sound was set to silent, but I could see the light flash on his screen. When I asked if they were okay, he said Kyle was trying to get organized. He said he had to help because that was what family did. I reminded him I was family too. He said I took things personally. I said people are personal. He looked past me at nothing and said I was exhausting myself. I tried to reset the tone. I suggested we go for a walk, no phones. He said maybe another day. I asked if he was mad at me. He said no. He did not meet my eyes when he said it. Diane asked me to help her with a list for the house. Filters, light bulbs, small repairs. I asked if Ethan knew about the list. She said she would show him later. She folded the paper and slid it into her pocket when Ethan came in and changed the subject to dinner. I began to wake up early and sit at the small desk in the spare room. I would open my laptop and try to plan the week. My planning felt like a cover for waiting. I was waiting for Ethan to tell me what he had already decided. The night before Kyle's birthday, Ethan said I did not need to buy anything. He said he and Diane had it handled. I said I could pick up a cake. He said Diane already ordered one. He thanked me for offering. He did not look like he meant the thanks. On the day of the small family dinner, I stood at the counter and listened as Ethan and Kyle talked about a drive they needed to make the following morning. They said a name I did not recognize. When I asked who that was, Kyle said just a friend. Ethan added nothing. After guests left, Ethan asked me if I was okay. The question sounded like a script. I said I was fine. He said good and went to his phone. I watched his shoulders relax when he saw a new message. He typed a short reply and locked the screen. I decided not to push for one night. I told myself it would show him I could step back. I said goodnight and went to bed first. He came in later and lay down on the far side. We slept facing away from each other. In the morning, he said he would be out before breakfast. He was gone by the time I reached the kitchen. Diane said the boys had an early start. She did not know when they would be back. I stood in the quiet and thought about how fast normal can change. Not with a big event, but with small edits. Phones that turned away. Words that dropped when I entered. Plans that formed without me. I told myself it had to even out. I told myself this was a rough stretch. I did not confront him that day. I stayed silent and watched. I believed it would pass if I did not make it worse. I did not know it was not a phase. I only knew that the distance in our bed had become the map of our days, and he seemed comfortable living inside it. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Ethan and Kyle had already left. Diane was in the kitchen making coffee. She said they had an appointment across town and asked if I would be around later. I said yes. She gave a short nod and didn't explain more. Around 11, I was in the spare room sorting through mail when I heard voices in the hallway. The door was half open. Diane said, "We have to watch the timeline." "I know," Ethan said. "Paperwork first, before she changes her mind. It's already moving. Do not bring her into it. Not yet." "I'll handle it," Diane added. "Just keep her calm." They moved away. I stayed still until the sound of their steps faded. When I walked to the kitchen a few minutes later, Diane asked if I wanted lunch. I said I'd eat later. Ethan said he'd be back in an hour. Neither looked like they were in a hurry to explain anything. That afternoon, I checked the mailbox. Empty. My mind kept going back to the word paperwork. Paperwork for what? Whose mind could change? Why it had to be hidden from me? The following day, just after noon, I opened the front door and saw a large manila envelope inside the box. My name was written in block letters across the front. No return address. Local postmark. Inside was a stack of papers clipped together. On top, residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions. My name was listed as the seller. The property address was my house across town, the one I owned before Ethan. I had not listed it for sale. I had not spoken to anyone about selling. The buyer's name was blank. The purchase price showed only a range. Behind it was a listing agreement for a brokerage I didn't recognize. The contact information field was empty. A sticky note read, "Sign and returns with ID." No signature, no cover letter, no explanation. I went through every page. My name appeared in every spot a seller's name would be. There were spaces for my initials and blank lines for dates. I read them twice. Nothing explained why this had been sent to me. I called Ethan. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I went to the spare room and pulled out my file box. I took the deed to that house from the folder. My name alone No liens, no notes. I had paid every bill since I bought it, long before we were married. A few minutes later, Diane appeared in the doorway. "Need anything from the store?" she asked. Her eyes went to the envelope on the desk and then away again. I said no. She left. As soon as she was gone, I photographed every page of the agreement and emailed them to myself. Then I put the papers back in the envelope and locked them in the bottom drawer of the desk. Ethan came home around 3. He asked if anything came in the mail. I said just the usual. He looked relieved in a way he didn't hide fast enough. "Did you send me anything?" I asked. "Why?" "Because something came." "Must be junk mail," he said, already looking at his phone. He didn't ask what it was. Later, I searched the document titles online. Every result said the same. Never sign without an attorney, and drafts usually come from someone you know. I walked back into the kitchen. Ethan asked if I was okay. I said yes. He didn't ask about the envelope. That night, I put it under a stack of notebooks in the locked drawer. I woke several times thinking about it. Each time, the same thought came back. There's a sale process with my name on it, and I didn't agree to it. In the morning, the mailbox was empty. Diane asked me to drive her to the pharmacy. On the way back, she said, "We try to keep things efficient here." "I've noticed," I said. "Good," she replied, and turned to look out the window. When we got home, Ethan and Kyle were on the porch talking. They stopped when they saw me. Ethan said they had to go handle something and left without saying where. I went to the spare room, unlocked the drawer, and laid out every page of the agreement. My name, my property, and a process already moving forward. This was no longer suspicion. It was proof. I didn't tell Ethan I had read the papers. I wanted to see what he would do without knowing I was aware. From that moment, I started watching everything more closely. The next day, I logged into my bank account. A large transfer had been made from Ethan's personal account to Kyle's. It was more than either of them would move casually. I wrote down the exact amount and the date. That evening, Ethan and Kyle were in the living room with Diane. I stood in the hallway out of sight. Kyle said, "The main thing is keeping her from meeting with a real estate attorney before the date." Ethan said, "She won't. We'll get it all." Diane said, "Then no delays." I stayed still until their voices dropped and the sound of the TV came on. Then I walked in as if I had been upstairs. Diane asked about my day. Ethan didn't look at me. Later that night, I thought about something Ethan had told me 2 weeks earlier, that he had passed all the papers to the notary for a formality about the house. I hadn't asked questions then. Now it felt connected. The next morning, while Ethan was in the shower, I took his briefcase from the closet. Inside was a folder labeled escrow. I opened it just enough to see a notary's name and my own on a form I had never signed. There was a signature next to my printed name, but it wasn't mine. I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. I knew if they had managed to record a power of attorney with a forged signature, they could already have authority to sell my house. All they needed was to complete escrow before I found out. I spent the rest of that day looking for anything else in the house with my name on it. In the bottom drawer of Ethan's desk, I found a file for our joint tax returns. My Social Security number was written on a separate sheet, along with account numbers I didn't recognize. I photographed the page with my phone and returned it to the folder. That evening, I waited until Ethan and Kyle were in the garage and called my credit card company. I asked if there had been new accounts opened in my name. The agent told me one had been opened 3 months ago with a high limit. I had no knowledge of it. I wrote down the details. When they came back in, I didn't mention the call. Ethan asked if I wanted to go out to dinner. I said I had work to finish. Kyle made a comment about how much I stayed in lately. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I listened from the spare room while Ethan spoke on the phone. He said, "We just need her signature page, then we're good." He paused, then said, "If she doesn't sign, we still have the POA." I heard the other person laugh. Ethan didn't correct them. That night, when Diane went to bed, I opened the hallway closet where she kept a metal box for documents. Inside were folders for utilities, medical records, and one labeled property. I flipped through it quickly. There were copies of my house's property tax statements, all addressed to me, but stapled to notes written in Diane's handwriting about sale proceeds and Kyle's buy-in. I put everything back before I heard footsteps. Ethan came into the hallway and asked what I was doing. I said I was looking for a sewing kit. He stared at me for a second and walked away. The next morning, I called the county recorder's office. I asked if a power of attorney had been filed with my name on it. The clerk said yes. Recorded 2 months ago. The principal was my name. The agent was Ethan. The notary listed was someone I had never met. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the spare room with the door closed. My hands felt cold, but my head was clear. They had already set up everything they needed to sell the house without me. That evening, Ethan asked if I could help Diane with dinner. While I was chopping vegetables, I listened to him and Kyle in the next room. Kyle said, "Once it's in escrow, she can't stop it." Ethan said, "Exactly. That's why the date matters." I put down the knife and looked toward the doorway, but neither of them came in. Diane spoke over them, telling me to hand her the salt. When we sat down to eat, Ethan asked if I had any plans for the weekend. I said no. He said, "Good. Then don't make any." After dinner, I went to my room and locked the door. I made a list of every document I had seen and every phrase I had overheard. Dates, amounts, names. I kept the list in my purse. For the rest of that week, I acted normal. I answered questions, helped with errands, and kept my phone close. I didn't bring up the envelope, the forged signature, or the power of attorney. I wanted them to think I was still in the dark. Inside, I was counting days. If they were talking about escrow, there was already a buyer. If they had a date, it was close. And if they reached it before I acted, the house would be gone before I could stop them. 2 days after I confirmed the power of attorney was filed, I decided to see the house myself. Ethan had told me he was working late. Diane said she would be at a friend's. Kyle's car wasn't in the driveway. I drove across town and parked in front. The blinds were open. Through the window, I saw Ethan at the kitchen table with Kyle and a man in a gray suit. Papers were spread out in front of them. I knocked on the door. Ethan froze for a moment, then got up and opened it. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I came to check my house," I said. Inside, the man in the suit glanced at Ethan, then at me. He had a folder open with my property address printed at the top. Kyle sat with his arms crossed. On the table was a contract with a signed notary page attached. My printed name was there, along with a signature that was not mine. "What is this?" I asked. "It's for the sale," Ethan said. "You don't need to panic." "This is my house," I said. "It's for the family," Kyle said. "We're putting the money into my business." "You're selling my property without my consent," I said. "You gave consent when you signed the power of attorney," Ethan replied. I never signed anything, I said. He didn't answer. He looked at the man in the suit. The man said, "Everything's in order. We're just finalizing terms." I stepped closer and picked up the top sheet. It was a purchase agreement with a buyer's name filled in. The price was listed. The closing date was less than 3 weeks away. "You forged my signature," I said. "That's a serious accusation," the man said quickly. Ethan stepped between us. "We're doing what's best. The house is just sitting there. This way, it helps the family." "It helps you," I said. He shook his head. "We've already spent months on this. The buyer is ready. There's no going back." Kyle added, "You weren't even using it. You rent it out. This way, the money stays here." "It's my decision, not yours," I said. Ethan picked up the folder and closed it. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself." "I'm not leaving my own house," I said. The man in the suit spoke up. "Legally, he has authority. I've seen the recorded document. If you have a problem, you need to take it to court." I looked at Ethan. "You planned this the entire time." "I planned for us," he said. "You're making it into a fight." I took my phone out and started recording video of the table, the documents, and the people in the room. Ethan reached for it. I stepped back. "You don't want to do that," he said. "I already did," I replied. Kyle muttered something to Ethan. Ethan told him to get the rest of the paperwork from the car. Kyle left the room. I took photos of the pages while Ethan stood watching me. He didn't try to stop me this time. When Kyle came back, he had another folder. Inside were escrow instructions already signed. Again, my forged signature. The escrow officer's name and contact information were listed. I picked up my purse. "I'll be speaking to the police," I said. Ethan followed me to the door. "That's a mistake," he said. "You'll ruin everything for everyone." "I'm not part of your everyone," I said. Outside, I dialed the non-emergency police line from my car. I explained that someone was attempting to sell my property with forged documents. The dispatcher told me to meet an officer at the station to file a report. As I drove away, Ethan called my phone twice. I didn't answer. He sent a text. "You're overreacting. We can fix this without making it ugly." At the station, I handed over the photos and explained what I had seen. The officer took copies and gave me a case number. He said a detective would follow up. When I got home, Diane was sitting in the living room. She looked up from her phone. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You should ask Ethan," I said, walking past her. In my room, I locked the door and backed up all the photos and videos to cloud storage. I saved the police case number in 3 different places. 10 minutes later, Ethan knocked. I didn't answer. He said through the door, "You're making a big mistake. We're family." I sat on the bed, listening to his footsteps move away. There was no family in what I had just seen, only people who thought I was expendable. The day after I filed the police report, an officer called to confirm they had opened an investigation. He asked for copies of any documents I still had. I emailed him the photos and the power of attorney I had found online. That evening, Ethan tried to speak to me in the kitchen. "We can fix this," he said. I didn't answer. He added, "You don't understand the position you've put us in." I told him I understood it clearly. He left the room. 2 days later, I got a call from my attorney. He had been referred by a friend I trusted. I explained everything and sent him the same files I gave the police. He told me to prepare for pushback. "They'll try to discredit you," he said. That pushback started immediately. A neighbor stopped me while I was getting the mail and asked if I was okay. She said Diane had told her I'd been under a lot of stress and wasn't sleeping well. Another neighbor mentioned that Kyle had said I was forgetful lately. I understood the pattern. They were laying a foundation so that if I spoke about the forgery, it would sound like paranoia. The detective called me again to say they had contacted the notary, listed on the power of attorney. The notary claimed to have witnessed me sign it in person. I told him that was a lie. He said they would follow up. A week later, I received a letter from a bank I'd never used. It was a notice about a past due payment on a credit account in my name. I called the bank and learned it had been opened 6 months ago. The mailing address was this house. My attorney added that to the case file. He told me identity theft charges might be possible along with the fraud. Meanwhile, Ethan and Kyle avoided me unless Diane was in the room. When we were all together, she would act overly friendly, asking about my day, offering to make me tea. As soon as I left the room, I could hear their voices drop to a whisper. One afternoon, my attorney called to tell me he had filed an emergency motion to freeze any sale of the property. The court date was set for the following week. That same night, Ethan confronted me. "You're destroying this family," he said. I told him this family had destroyed itself when it forged my name. He shook his head and walked out. 2 days before the court date, I got a call from the detective. They had obtained security footage from my house, the one across town, taken from a neighbor's camera. It showed Ethan and Kyle inside, going through a file box in the living room. The date stamp matched the week the power of attorney was recorded. That video became the turning point. The detective said it was enough to add criminal charges for forgery and fraud. The court hearing was tense. Ethan's lawyer argued that I had given implied consent to manage the property. My attorney presented the deed, the photos, and the video. The judge ordered a freeze on any sale until the criminal case was resolved. After the hearing, Ethan wouldn't look at me. Kyle stared like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Diane walked past me without a word. In the weeks that followed, I got calls from unknown numbers. Some were hang-ups, some were voices telling me to drop it. I started keeping a log for the police. One evening, a detective called to say charges had been formally filed against Ethan and Kyle for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Diane was named as an uncharged co-conspirator. By then, most of the money from the fraudulent credit accounts was gone. My attorney said even if we won, recovering the money would be unlikely. Ethan moved out within days of the charges. He didn't tell me where he was going. Kyle left with him. Diane stayed in the house, but barely spoke to me. I focused on preparing for trial. Every document, every message, every photograph was backed up in 3 places. My attorney told me the prosecution's case was strong, but it could take months. One morning, I saw Diane loading boxes into her car. She said she was going to stay with a friend until things settled down. She didn't say goodbye. A week later, I learned through the detective that both Ethan and Kyle had been arraigned and released on bail. The trial date was months away. The detective warned me not to contact them. It didn't matter. I had nothing left to say. The case was now in the hands of the court. But the damage had already been done. The money from the fraudulent credit was gone. My credit score had dropped. The house was safe for now, but everything around it, the people, the trust, the marriage, was already beyond saving. It had been a year since the charges were filed. The trial still hadn't started. My attorney said delays were common, but every postponement felt like a slow erasure of what happened. Ethan never came back to the house. I didn't know where he was living. Kyle stayed away too. Diane had left months earlier, telling me she was staying with a friend until this was over. She never called, never asked about the case. I had moved into a small rental apartment closer to work. The house we used to share sat empty, except for the furniture I left behind. I didn't sell it. I couldn't bring myself to live there again either. The property across town, my house, remained in my name. The freeze order was still in place. I checked the county records online once a month to make sure nothing had changed. It hadn't. My financial situation was different. I had 2 jobs now, my regular office position during the week and weekend shifts at a store. The extra income went toward legal fees and repairing my credit. The fraudulent accounts were closed, but the damage to my record remained. The police investigation was still active. Occasionally, the detective would call to update me, another interview scheduled, another document reviewed. I learned that the notary who claimed to witness my signature had stopped returning their calls. Every time my phone rang from an unknown number, I felt the same tension I had the day the envelope arrived. Most were spam calls. Sometimes they were legitimate, but none were from Ethan or his family. I didn't hear much about them until a co-worker mentioned seeing Kyle's name in a local news article. His business had shut down. The short piece described unpaid debts and a pending lawsuit. I read it twice, not because I wanted details, but because it confirmed what I already suspected. The plan they used my house for had failed. The information didn't bring me relief. The loss was still mine. They had tried to erase me from my own life, and even without the sale going through, parts of it were gone for good. Some nights I'd wake up in the rental apartment and forget for a moment where I was. The silence felt different from the house. Not heavier, just unfamiliar. There was no sound of someone else in the hallway. No low voices behind closed doors. I didn't tell many people the full story. Most only knew there had been a legal dispute with my in-laws. A few close friends knew more, but even with them, I kept the details short. Explaining every step meant reliving it, and I didn't want to keep doing that. On weekends, I avoided driving past the old neighborhood. It was easier not to see the house where all of it began. I didn't want to think about the kitchen where Ethan first told me I'd be leaving soon, or the room where I heard Diane talk about timelines and paperwork. Once, during a grocery trip, I saw Diane in the parking lot. She was putting bags into the trunk of her car. She glanced in my direction, but didn't stop or wave. I didn't either. We got into our cars and drove away in opposite directions. Months passed like that. Work, rent, bills, occasional updates from my attorney. No trial date yet. The charges were still on record, but there was no guarantee of a conviction. My attorney said to be prepared for any outcome. I kept my documents organized in a single box. The deed, the police report, printed emails, photographs of the forged contracts, everything in chronological order. If the case moved forward, I wanted no delays because of me. I didn't block Ethan's number. There were no calls to block. The last direct message he'd sent was almost a year old. We could have handled this differently. I had never replied. Some people told me I should feel vindicated that the house was still mine. I didn't. It was never about winning. It was about knowing people I lived with, people I considered family, could sit together and plan to take something from me without hesitation. The rental started to feel less temporary after the first year. I bought a small table, replaced the blinds, and hung a clock in the kitchen. I still avoided leaving important papers in visible places. Habits from the old house stayed with me, Every now and then, I'd receive court notices by mail, mostly procedural updates, motions filed, deadlines extended. The language was always dry, but I could read between the lines. More time passing meant more distance between what happened and any real accountability. I stopped checking Ethan or Kyle's social media. At first, I'd looked out of curiosity, wondering if they'd post something that hinted at the case. They didn't. Eventually, I decided I didn't need to know what they were doing. When I thought about the year behind me, the main thing I remembered was the silence. Not just theirs, but mine. The way I learned to hold information, to watch without speaking, to move without announcing it. That silence had started in their house. It followed me here. The detective called again at the end of the year. He said the trial might finally be set for the coming spring. His voice didn't sound convinced. I thanked him and hung up. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table in the rental and looked at the clock on the wall. Another year gone. Nothing felt finished. Nothing felt settled. After the detective's call about a possible spring trial date, the months that followed were the same. No progress, no new information. I checked the court's online case records every Monday morning before work. Each time, the status showed the same 2 words: pending trial. The evidence box stayed in my closet at the rental. Once a week, I took it down, unlocked it, and went through the contents in the same order. First, the property deed to my house. Then the printed photographs of the forged contracts. After that, the email chains with my attorney, the police report, copies of my bank statements showing credit accounts I had never opened. Every page had a sticky note marking the date it was created or received. I kept the order exact. I counted the pages to be certain nothing was missing. By April, I had stopped thinking a trial date would happen soon. My attorney told me it could take another year. He explained that we could file a separate civil suit, but that would mean another set of legal fees and another case to manage. I told him I wanted to see this case through before starting another. In May, a letter arrived from the prosecutor's office. It stated in one paragraph that the trial was postponed again. There was no explanation, no new date. That night, I placed the letter on the kitchen table and left it there. I didn't react. I didn't move it to the box until the next day. A week later, I saw Ethan for the first time in almost 2 years. I was leaving the grocery store. He was walking in. He slowed, looked at me once, then kept walking. No words, no pause. We passed like strangers. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. We could still work this out. I took a screenshot, sent it to my attorney, and deleted it. His reply came back within a minute. Do not respond. The rest of my life stayed narrow. I worked at the office Monday through Friday, at the store on weekends. I rarely saw friends. My co-workers only knew I was involved in a legal dispute with family. That was all I told them. The old house remained under the freeze order. Once a month, the property manager I hired sent me a set of photographs of the rooms, each with a timestamp. The county property records still listed me as the owner. Nothing changed. In July, I received an email from the detective. The notary who claimed to have witnessed my forged signature had agreed to meet with investigators. It was the first movement in months, but there was no promise of a quick outcome. The summer passed. Fall arrived. I signed a renewal on my lease for another year. I bought a larger kitchen table and replaced the blinds, but kept all important documents locked away. That habit had stayed with me. In October, a court notice came in the mail. The phrase "continuation granted" was underlined. My attorney explained it meant the trial was delayed again. He said the case against Ethan and Kyle remained strong, but nothing would move forward until the court set a new date. By December, I stopped talking about the case to anyone. When asked, I said it was ongoing. Most people stopped asking after hearing the same answer more than once. One evening, I decided to take the evidence box out and go through it in full. I cleared the table and laid everything out in chronological order. The first photograph was of the manila envelope addressed to me in block letters. Inside were the sale documents for my house, the first sign that something had been planned without me. Next was the power of attorney with my forged signature, notarized by a stranger. Then the property tax statements from Diane's folder, with her handwritten notes about sale proceeds and Kyle's buy-in. After that were the photographs from the day I walked into my house and found Ethan, Kyle, and the man in the suit. The images showed the contracts on the table, the pen in Kyle's hand, and Ethan standing to the side. The stack ended with the police report, the freeze order, my attorney's filings, and the most recent court notices. 2 years of my life, documented from start to present. I placed everything back into the box, locked it, and returned it to the closet. I locked the closet door, though no one else had a key. The phone stayed silent. No calls from the detective. No emails from my attorney. No contact from Ethan or anyone in his family. I sat on the bed, looking at the closed closet door. I thought about the people I had lived with and how they had calmly decided to remove me from my own life. I am not telling this for sympathy. I am telling it because keeping it inside any longer feels heavier than saying it. They lost the sale. They lost the business. And I lost something I cannot get back. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.